everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. WO Stevie Garofalo. Truth comes first, reasons come last. We're always and constantly learning. We stop learning, we stop teaching. We at least stop teaching well. And if we stop teaching well, you know what ends up that the reason is? Because we didn't continue with learning well. Today I want to talk to you, continue on our last pickup on the questions about knowing God rightly. We covered questions 1 through 4, and I want to pick up at 5 here. Question is, why is life linked with God being incomprehensible? And then he goes on to say, that seemed to be a case in the video. You want to go to equippedacademy.com, knowing God rightly. So it says, that seemed to be the case in the video. And I was a little bit confused by that. And we're going to pick up here and jump right into Romans chapter 11 to 33, verse 33. In the ESV says, oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways. Now listen, God is a simple, infinite, all-knowing, omniscient, all-good God. We can apprehend God's infinitude, right? We can kind of, or better, we can capture an idea through his attributes. That's what we're talking about in the whole course. Or finitely through his word in prayer, right? All of that stuff. But we can't completely comprehend God because we're not an infinite creature. Okay, we can know him through his attributes. That's why it's understanding God rightly is important. But we cannot fully comprehend God. Again, or we'd be all-knowing. We would be God. Okay, and God is all-powerful. He's infinite. We are not those things. We cannot. Our minds cannot completely get our hands around infinitude. It just has no beginning and has no end. We would be God, again, as such, and that's impossible. So that cannot be two exactly the same things, right? If we were to understand that, we would be God, and you couldn't have God and then have us and be two exactly same things. We're his created beings. We are not God the creator. We can create things like automobiles and stuff, right? We can, really, that's more, it's not even really inventing anything. It's more discovering. So it's more philosophical answer, but let's jump right into 6. What does it mean that God is simple? All right. When I first heard that, I said, you're calling God a simpleton? No, simple. In what way is he simple? So, and then they said, we're still struggling with this as a group. So I point to John 4:24 in the ESV. It says this, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth, meaning mind and heart as the Holy Spirit will unveil us to the truth. Simple means that God is pure spirit. He has no it has no finite moving parts. Doesn't have arms, doesn't have gears, doesn't any physical eyes. These are all metaphors in the Bible. He's not made up of any material matter. So we are finite. Right? We're made up of matter. Our bodies are, right? We came from clay. We're going to return to dust and the clay. God is not composed of parts, though. So he's pure spirit. His God's essence and attributes are one and the same. So his essence are not a collection of qualities, but God is those qualities. These qualities don't make up God. God are those things. So we call those attributes, or his essence, or his divine simplicity. That's what it's called, as a way to understand God's perfect and indivisible nature. So I hope that explains it. God, in other words, God's just pure spirit. He's I am. He doesn't have beginning, doesn't have an end. We do. We were born in the earth, and we leave the earth at a certain point, okay? Yes, we're av-eternal, as I've said before in this channel, which means we enter eternity into a certain point, but we never always have been. Only God is. Question 7. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam believe God created the universe ex nihilo, or out of nothing. So what does this mean for God's eternality? And the leader of the group, Jeddah, there had offered up an explanation, but he said, but we're still working on it. So I answered this. Ex nihilo is simply a theological term or a doctrine that God created the universe simply out of nothing. He didn't use pre-existing materials, any space junk, didn't come out of God himself. He is pure spirit, so you can't take material out of pure simple spirit. Okay, this comes from Anselm, by the way, from the Prolegum, and a number of sources. And Augustine, City of God, Philo, the works of Philo, and Thomas Aquinas, of course, in the Summa Theologica. They all talk about this. Creation ex nihilo is from the Latin meaning from out of nothing. It is the theistic view of origins that affirms that God brought us into the universe and created all things into existence without using any existing material. Theism declares that only God is external and that he brought everything else into being with the use of any pre-existing material without making the universe out of pieces of anything, even himself. Rather, it was from nothing, ex nihilo. And so, right here, you only have three choices, as I just stated. I'll just wrap it up with this. The explanation of creation of the universe and of creation in general is either ex materia, out of existing stuff. Who made the stuff? Space junk. Who made the planets? Well, there's a bunch of junk sitting in a pile. Was it at a giant Home Depot that kind of... Well, who made that giant... Who made all those things? So that can't be true. Ex deo, you can't, again, take anything material, make anything like any of the planets, the dirt, diamonds, gold, plastic, air, water. You can't make it out of God because God's pure spirit. You can't take anything material out of something that's not material. And then lastly is ex nihilo, as we just talked about. In the end, finite matter is not and cannot be eternal. So all matter had to be created by some divine creative act. So we can't explain it in human terms. It's a concept that can be created from nothing. That just blows our mind, and that's the way it goes. And it's the best. There's certain things we have to take by faith. And if you understand as God's being outside of the entire universe, he really is in the universe and he's outside of the universe. But only God is outside the universe. Imagine, never had a beginning. Like we can't understand that because we are all everything we know in this world has been created. Your car was built at a certain date. You were born at a certain date. Everything has a start point, everything has a life, and everything as short or as long as that might be, and everything has an end point. And that's all I'll say. That ends with the questions. Listen, if you have any questions, put it in the comments field down below. If you want to learn some more cool stuff in depth, go to equippedacademy.com or join my community, StephenGarofalo.com. Want to see you over there. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo. See you in the next episode. This is your Reason for Truth for today.